My name is Jennifer Kurtanis, and I'm the director of the Farmington Valley Health District. Welcome to this edition of Health Matters, a public health show brought to you by the Farmington Valley Health District. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Sharon Dunning. Sharon is an epidemiologist with the Connecticut Department of Public Health, and she is the Adult Immunizations Coordinator at the State Health Department. Vaccines have been one of the greatest public health successes over the years, resulting in significant lives saved from vaccine-preventable diseases like measles, polio, mumps, and rubella. We often hear about vaccines because of the need to have children vaccinated from these vaccine-preventable diseases, unless we hear about adult vaccines and the importance of that. So I'm very pleased to have you here today, Sharon, to talk to us about this important issue and the real importance of adult immunization. So why don't we start by you just sharing a little bit about why adult immunizations are so important?
Well, adult immunizations are very important because first and foremost, as we age, our bodies start to wane with immunity. So it's very important that we boost our immunity, and the best way to do that is with vaccines, Jen.
Very good. So why is it that we're hearing more about adult immunizations? What are some of the common vaccines that adults should be thinking about getting?
So some of the common vaccines that adults should be getting are primarily your flu vaccine, your pneumococcal vaccine, your shingles vaccines. These are very important vaccines as an adult ages because what we see in the research is that as the immune system wanes and the adult ages, they need a boost effect by boosting with vaccination.
Okay. So one of the vaccines that we do hear a lot about for adults is the flu vaccine. And as we enter the fall season, certainly we want to encourage everyone to receive a flu vaccine, but adults in particular. Can you tell us a little bit about flu vaccine for adults, when they should start thinking about getting immunized, and why it is that we need to get the flu vaccine every single year?
So the flu vaccine is a very important vaccine because every person above the age of 6 months and older should receive this vaccine. There are always circulating viruses, flu virus strains circulating around the country and around the world, actually, and the best defense that you have is a vaccination. Today, there's numerous types of flu vaccine available for the adults and actually children to receive. There's all kinds of formulations in injectables, which is a vaccination in the arm, of course. Then there's formulations like the high dose, which is a vaccination that is preferable for seniors by the infectious disease physicians because it offers higher properties of protection against the flu viruses that they may be exposed to. Other vaccines that are available are for adults who may be allergic to eggs, for instance, and have an egg allergy. So there's a component in some of the injectable vaccines that might cause a problem for them where they might have a reaction. Therefore, there are other vaccines that are now available for them. And then there are other vaccines that perhaps persons may not feel comfortable with, so this is why there's other vaccines available on the market.
Mm-hmm. So I know now access to flu vaccine, it used to be you could really only go to your primary care physician to receive vaccine, but now flu vaccine is readily available in a lot of different locations. The pharmacies are offering vaccine. You can walk into a Walmart or a big box store in some cases and get a vaccine. Is this, our goal is certainly to get as many people vaccinated as possible. Are these things that our senior population should think about? Are they prepared to discuss with someone if they have questions about the type of flu vaccine they should get?
Absolutely. The pharmacy, most of the pharmacies, the retail pharmacies, are located in every community, nearly within a mile or so from one's residence. So therefore, there's a convenience factor. Most pharmacies are credited and available with the education to offer information and guidance on vaccination. So therefore, yes, you could go to a pharmacist about adult vaccines. And when we say adult, we're talking above age 19. Those persons would receive vaccines in a number of different locations. Health departments, for instance, or visiting nurse associations offer vaccination. There are a number of different places that one can get vaccines as an adult.
Yeah, we just want to try and make it as convenient as possible.
Absolutely.
So more people take advantage.
Yes.
Are there any other vaccines for adults that are required annually, or is it really just the flu vaccine that is an annual vaccine that we encourage?
Right. Really, the influenza vaccine is pretty much the only vaccine that's an annual that you would need to boost up or get another one in the next season, yes.
Okay. And so what are some of the other vaccines that we may be less familiar with that adults should consider getting?
Some of the vaccines that really are important this time of year, for instance, would be like the pneumococcal vaccination. This is an important vaccine because just like the flu vaccine, there are a lot of circulating strains of viruses. And one defense would be the pneumococcal vaccine, because one could be exposed to a strain where they could come down with pneumonia and end up being in the hospital. And many times when a patient is in the hospital, if they have not received their pneumococcal vaccination, they may have a difficulty fighting off pneumonia while being in the hospital, or compromised due to being exposed to flu. And again, this comes into play when you have someone who has other diseases, or what we call in the science business comorbidities. If they are diabetics, or if they have heart disease, kidney disease, or any of these other issues that they're competing with when they come down or exposed with pneumonia. So a pneumococcal vaccination is very important. Another vaccine that I think is important, and I think that most in the adult space would feel that this is an important vaccine, is shingles vaccine. Mm-hmm. Seniors have probably heard a lot about that vaccine. It's very important. It's a form of the chicken pox. It's actually what we call the latent version of the chicken pox vaccine. And it starts to reactivate later in life, generally around the time that one turns age 60. Though we do know of cases where a person above 50 has been known to come down with severe cases of shingles. Yeah,
I know. I recently had a friend who had posted on Facebook, and she's under the age of 60, had come up with shingles. I know it's an excruciatingly painful situation, and the requirements or the recommendations for shingles vaccine has actually changed more recently, correct?
Yes, that is correct. If you've received a shingles vaccine before, that vaccine was a different product. Is it possible to talk about the name of the product? I don't know, but the other company that had a vaccine, I would say prior to 2017, was a vaccine that was pretty good. It was all we had, and it would protect one for about between 40 to 60%. However, there's a new vaccine now available that's about 90% or better protection. Mm-hmm. So getting back to your original question, it is recommended for persons 50 and older to get this vaccine. If you've received the first product, which is prior to 2017, it is recommended that you get the vaccination with this new vaccine. Yeah. The key here would be that you still need to get 2 shots separated by 2 months. Okay. And then for persons who've never been vaccinated, who are 65, it is highly recommended that you get the shingles vaccine, 50 and older.
I know, having heard of my friend's experience, I was pleased that they had lowered the age, because it was not a situation I ever wanted to experience. It seemed very debilitating for a period of time and very painful.
Yes.
I know also in the youth we vaccinate against things like pertussis and tetanus. Are those things that adults need to be thinking about in terms of vaccinations as well?
Yes, actually they are. The pertussis vaccine
and pertussis is also, most people refer to it as whooping cough.
That is correct.
Okay.
So whooping cough, which is many years ago was known as the 100 years cough. So it's a very severe cough that's very difficult, and it's a continuous violent series of coughs that makes it very difficult to speak or eat, and there's sometimes vomiting associated with it, so it can be very painful. We vaccinate children for this vaccine. It's mandated in schools so that school-age children will not be exposed and then cause outbreaks. The other population that we need to be concerned about, and there's actually two, there's the newborn. The newborn has antibodies that protect them against different diseases based on the maternal antibodies from the mother while they're in the fetus. And once the child is born, the child has no vaccinations, as we know, and the earliest that one can receive that vaccine would be at 6 weeks. So then there's a series of vaccines with the pertussis that the child would receive at that time to protect them. The other population that's vulnerable with this vaccine would be the seniors, because our seniors are grandparents, and grandparents are generally around the newborn. When mom comes home, there's a concern about exposures, and we know that children are vaccinated because that's mandated, but we sometimes forget about dad or grandparents.
And we also have that window of time, the first 6 weeks, where an infant can't be immunized or isn't immunized.
Yes.
No protection.
No
and
protection.
So they could be exposed.
That is correct. So that we want to protect the baby from being unnecessarily inadvertently being exposed and then coming down with disease. This can unfortunately be fatal to a newborn that's unvaccinated. So it's very key that all the people that would be around the child or the newborn are vaccinated.
So as an adult, a pertussis vaccine is really recommended primarily for grandparents and others that might be in close contact with a newborn.
That's correct.
Okay.
And also think in terms of the senior who maybe they have a weakened immune system, maybe they're heart disease or diabetic. It would behoove them to also get the pertussis vaccination, because the compromising conditions that are the side effects of the virus, for instance, if one were to come down with it, could be very debilitating. And if you're already compromised with another illness that you're fighting, it would be very difficult for you. It could lead to hospitalization.
Yeah. So, you know, as we get older, you talk about comorbidities, but it's only natural that as we get older, we may develop chronic conditions, be that a respiratory condition, be that heart disease, be that diabetes. Maybe some of us are dealing with cancer, etc. All of those things would potentially put someone at increased risk for other infections, and that's where immunizations might be important.
Absolutely. One of the best defenses would always be to get vaccinations. Okay,
very good. We talked a little bit about tetanus. I know I work out in the garden a lot, and tetanus is something, a bacteria, correct, that lives in the soil. Correct. And we do have a vaccine against tetanus. It causes, untreated cases of tetanus can be very serious. It causes something called lockjaw, etc. Adults should also consider getting tetanus periodically, correct?
That is correct. Many times seniors, and actually anybody over 19 who maybe have gardening as a hobby, can potentially get injured by a rusty nail or some object in the ground and have a wound. And so there's such thing as wound management that you can also use the tetanus vaccine for. But I can tell you that the great thing is that the tetanus vaccine is part of the pertussis vaccine. It's a combination vaccine. So therefore, if one gets the pertussis vaccine, they're also getting the tetanus portion. So they would be protected for both of those diseases.
Very good. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. I know I've had the opportunity to do some traveling overseas, and as a part of preparing for my travels, I've had to have some additional vaccine that I wouldn't probably necessarily have even thought about having. We have a population that likes to stay active, and we have a population in the Farmington Valley that does a lot of traveling. What would you suggest to families and adults that are traveling overseas to protect themselves? Because we know that in some parts of the world there are greater risk of some of these vaccine preventable diseases.
Right. So it's always recommended prior to travel to check your immunization status, know which vaccines you're immune to, so that when you go to these different countries, you know that you likely will not have any problems and be exposed and come down with illness when you return back to the United States. We do find, however, in my line of work, that many times people wait till the last minute to find out whether or not they're properly vaccinated against these viruses. So I would have to say that I would recommend that you find out from your provider, your physician, what your status is. Are you truly immune? One of the things you can do on your own is to research this on the website for the cdc.gov. The Centers for Disease Control is a great resource for finding out about travel vaccination. And what you do is you look up the country that you're traveling to, and that information there will tell you what types of diseases are in that country and what types of vaccinations would be recommended. The key is to do this to plan so that you have enough time to get vaccination. Most vaccinations require about 2 weeks.
Yes. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because once you receive a vaccine, whether it's a travel vaccine or any other type of vaccine, it's not you get the shot and immediately you have immunity.
That's correct.
So tell us a little bit about what happens when you get a vaccine and what happens in your body.
So what happens is this. You get the vaccination and the response is not immediate. It takes about 2 weeks to 14 days after the vaccination is in the body, and it gets into your bloodstream, of course. And what's happening is it is building antibodies against circulating viruses, specifically the virus that you're being vaccinated for. And once that happens and your body starts to respond, the likelihood in most cases is that there is good protection, that you will not be exposed, or if you are exposed, you will not come down with disease. I have to be clear, there are some vaccines that require more than one vaccination. So to be complete, as we call it, you would need to complete the series before you could feel confident that you are immune.
So for instance, you mentioned the shingles vaccine. That's an example where you need two vaccinations separated by a period of time to really build up full immunity.
Correct.
And then with the exception of flu, which you need every year, and maybe are there, once you receive the series of vaccines, do you have lifetime immunity, or in older age?
Okay, so there's a couple of factors. Most vaccines, you do have lifetime immunity. The problem is that as we age, our bodies don't perform as well, they don't respond as well to vaccines. So as we're aging, we're in declining, if you will. As we age out, we're declining, and our bodies don't respond as well to vaccines. So there could be a chance where, as we age into our later years, like 90s or so, where some of the vaccines taper off and they're not as effective. And you may, if you were going to travel, consider getting a revaccination to boost your system.
Okay, very good. So do all general practitioners typically offer all of these vaccines? And as someone who is probably needing to get some vaccines, who would I go to talk to about what that schedule should look like?
Yes. So most general practitioners do offer the vaccine. Some do not. Some practitioners don't have the equipment that's required to maintain the vaccines in their offices. So there are pharmacies and other places that one can go to. You can go to your clinics, the local clinics. There are many clinics associated with the pharmacies that offer a place where you can get your vaccination. If you have a family practitioner or a primary care physician, more than likely they do have the vaccines.
Okay. But I would imagine, if you have any questions about which vaccines you should get, under what circumstance and what time frame, you could talk to your primary care physician, and then you would seek the best place to get those.
That's correct.
It's too bad it's not a little bit easier for some, because I would imagine that is a deterrent to adults getting vaccinated.
Yes, it can be a deterrent in that if you don't have a provider, then you might be at a loss as to how to go about finding out information. But I can assure you that some of the pharmacists are trained so that they are certified to provide counseling and guidance and information on what vaccines you need, when, and when to get them.
Yeah. When we talk about vaccine, there's always issues about, concern about safety, and how do we know that vaccines don't actually cause disease or have really negative consequences or side effects. Can you talk to us a little bit about the process for really ensuring that vaccines are vetted, and by the time they get from manufacturer to my arm, I can feel pretty confident that it's going to do what it's supposed to do and not harm me?
Right. So a lot of research goes into the manufacturing of a vaccine. The Centers for Disease Control has a scientific team that researches on vaccines, and from the disease to the nature of the disease, the characteristics of that disease, and then how the vaccine would be effective for the patient. The Food and Drug Association, the Food and Drug Administration is who licenses the vaccine, and they make sure that the manufacturers go through many clinical trials to make sure these vaccines are safe and effective. And then CDC and the FDA also follow up to ensure that before these vaccines are given to the recipient, in this case the United States, that these vaccines are safe to administer in humans. Mm-hmm.
And we want to encourage, adults to get vaccinated. Is it important for them? We teach chronic disease management. We tell folks that they should really track and keep with them all of the medications that they're taking and for what purpose. How important is it for adults to keep a vaccination record as well? Right.
So it's very important to keep track of your vaccination records. If you were heading to the hospital for a surgery, or if inadvertently you needed emergency surgery, the fact that you would know if you have been vaccinated, let's say in flu season, would be key. It's always important to have your own records, but many providers or physicians offer a portal where you can put that your information into a database, or the doctors do that at the visit, and therefore they keep track of your immunizations. The state of Connecticut does also offer a registry where immunizations are tracked, and a patient can get access to their information. As a matter of fact, the state of Connecticut is launching an immunization registry that will be lifespan, where all immunizations can be tracked from birth to death.
Wow, okay. So we've covered a lot of ground. As with all of these topics, the topic of adult immunizations is very large. There's a lot of vaccines, but there is a recommended schedule for vaccines for adults. We would encourage all of our listeners to seek a flu shot every single flu season, and discuss with their provider what additional adult immunizations they should seek. If you're looking for additional information on adult vaccines, certainly the Connecticut Department of Public Health has some great resources available that talk about the types of vaccines that people should get, and certainly the Farmington Valley Health District also provides information to adults on adult vaccine. I want to thank you very much for coming and talking to us about adult vaccine. Hopefully we can have you back and we can talk more specifically about any one of these. There's a lot of good information. But thank you again.
Thank you.
Until next time, remember, your greatest wealth is your health.